This happened about 2 months ago, and it completely changed how I see things. Before this, I was a very careless person. I didn't really think much about the consequences. If something felt off, I just ignored it. I guess I always assumed that things would just work out by themselves somehow. But after this incident, I certainly don't think like that anymore. I'm a 21-year-old female college student. I moved here from a small town out on the west coast, so naturally I don't have any family living nearby. I live in a full-size house. It originally belonged to my grandparents, but after they passed away, the house was left empty for a long time. But when I moved here for college, I started living here by myself. So naturally, I'm completely alone there most of the time. It was a Sunday, which meant my only day off. I was doing laundry, trying to get everything done as quickly as I could, so I could have the rest of the day to myself. While doing that, I checked my phone. I noticed I had received a DM on my Instagram. That wasn't unusual by itself, but this one was from a random account that I had never seen before. The message said, "Hi, nice profile pic." It felt random. It wasn't threatening, but it certainly wasn't any less creepy. I didn't think much of it though. I was looking forward to my day off, and I really didn't want to waste it on some random text message. So I just closed the app and went about my day, forgetting about it. Later that day, I was in my room watching a movie, almost zoning out. When I checked my phone again, to my surprise, I had received another message from that same account. The message said, "Don't worry, you can reply. I'm not a creep." That immediately felt off. It just made it creepier. I opened my profile and started scrolling through my posts, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. That same account that texted me, it had commented on almost every one of my posts and photos. The comments just said things like beautiful, gorgeous, or looking great, stuff like that. And they used a lot of heart emojis in the comments. It was honestly really weird. For someone who said they weren't a creep, they sure were acting like one. But again, I didn't want to deal with it. I just wanted a nice peaceful day. So I decided to block the account. I figured whoever it was, they would get the hint and just leave me alone. And for a while, nothing happened. Days went by and I had essentially forgot all about the texts and comments. But about 2 weeks later, something strange started happening. I began noticing a white van parked across the street from my house almost every night. At first, I didn't think much of it, but it was always there, so subconsciously I started noticing it more often. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and glance outside, and it would just be there. And there would be other times where I'd come home late and it would be there, parked right outside the street. But the weirdest part is, I never saw anyone inside it. It was always empty. I never saw anyone get in or get out. It was just there. I figured it might have something to do with one of my neighbors. But deep down, I'm not gonna lie, I had a bad feeling about it. Living alone in a house like that, it started to feel unsettling. One night, I was fast asleep when I woke up in the middle of the night. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, so I wondered why I woke up all of a sudden. But I figured it was nothing and was about to go back to sleep when I heard something from inside my house. It was a faint sound coming from downstairs. I froze for a second. I thought I imagined it. But as I listened intently, I heard it again, almost like there was movement downstairs. But then, a loud crashing sound echoed through my house. It came from the kitchen, like something had fallen and shattered. My heart started racing instantly, as I was almost sure now that someone was inside my house. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and walked straight to my bedroom door and locked it shut. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The operator picked up and I whispered everything to him. I reported a break-in and told them that someone was inside my house and I had locked myself in my bedroom. The operator told me to stay put where I was and that the police were on their way. I tried to calm myself down, but I honestly couldn't. My heart was racing and all I could think about was that van parked outside my house. But then I heard footsteps. Deep and heavy footsteps, slowly coming upstairs toward my bedroom. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. And then the doorknob slowly started to turn. Whoever it was, they were clearly trying to get in. I felt my chest tighten as I stood there, inches away from the door, not knowing what to do. Then I heard his voice, clear as day. In a low and rough-sounding voice, the man said, "I know you're in there, Susie. Open up." And the moment he said my name, my entire body went cold. That's when everything clicked. The messages, the comments, the van parked outside my house every night. I was almost sure it was that same person. This was the guy I had blocked. When I didn't reply, he started banging on the door, yelling my name, telling me to open the door. Each hit against the door made me flinch, but I forced myself to stay quiet, hoping that he wouldn't break it down. But then I finally heard sirens right outside my house. The police had finally arrived, and with that, the banging on the door immediately stopped. He probably heard the sirens too. I heard him quickly walk away from the door. He rushed back downstairs, trying to get away. I heard shouting and noise and commotion coming from downstairs. It sounded like a struggle, but after a few seconds, everything went quiet. One of the officers knocked on my door, and I let them in. He escorted me downstairs, and that's when I finally saw the man. He was pinned on the ground by one of the officers. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but he had this creepy, unsettling smile on his face as he saw me. He kept repeating my name over and over, saying I shouldn't have blocked him and that he just wanted to talk. The officers took him away and I never saw him again. I didn't follow up with the police regarding the case because honestly I was too shook to do any of that. I still live in the same house. My parents were horrified when they found out and begged me to move back, but I didn't. Maybe that's reckless, but I guess I have grown too attached to this place. I still have no clue who that guy was, or why he was so obsessed with me, or how he even got my home address. But after everything that happened, I'm just grateful that it all ended and the guy was finally caught. This happened when I was 17 years old. I lived alone with my mother at the time. I was a very shy and introverted kid back then. I made very few friends during my time in high school and largely just kept to myself. This meant that my social life was basically non-existent and I was pretty much invisible to most kids my age. But I actually quite liked it that way. Being alone gave me a lot of time to explore a lot of things. I was a very curious kid, so naturally I would spend a lot of time trying different things just to see what they were like. Unfortunately, that curiosity ended up leading me somewhere I really wish it hadn't. During my freshman year of high school, I became friends with a kid named Dustin. and it was through him that I discovered the existence of the dark web. Dustin showed me how to access it and what to browse and how to find different kinds of content. But after the first year, he moved to a different town and I hadn't been in contact with him ever since. But even after he left, I still regularly visited the dark web. There were times where I would spend hours on the dark web, just browsing through random links or watching strange and unsettling videos. I guess this was just my idea of entertainment. I know it sounds weird, but I guess that's just the kind of kid I was. One night, I was browsing through the dark web as usual, when I came across a random link. I had come across hundreds of such links over the years, so I just clicked on it, thinking nothing of it. The link directed me to a new page, and a video popped up on screen. The video buffered for a second and then started playing automatically. It showed a dark room lit by a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. And in the middle of the room, there was a person wearing a sheep costume. They weren't doing anything in particular. They were just slowly walking around the room. And that was basically it. There was no sound, no interaction, nothing else happening. It was just this person in this weird costume, moving around aimlessly. When it finished, I wasn't exactly creeped out. It was kinda the opposite. I was kinda amused and laughed at how silly and stupid that whole thing was. The dark web had its fair share of weird and creepy stuff. But quite often you would run into these kinds of videos where it just feels like the people who made it are trying too hard to be creepy and scary, and it just ends up coming across as cringe and silly. This video was a perfect example of that. I noticed that underneath the video was actually a small comment section, although this section was completely empty. There were no comments. So I suppose just for the sheer amusement, I decided to leave a comment of my own. I wrote, LOL, talk about cringe. In hindsight, I shouldn't have left that comment. The internet is dangerous enough as it is, but trying to mock someone on the dark web is just not a good idea. But in the moment, I guess I was just being a stupid teenager who didn't know any better. After that, I closed it and went back to browsing. A couple hours go by and I was getting pretty tired. I was about to close my computer and go to sleep when I remembered about my comment that I posted. So out of curiosity, I went back and checked it out to see if anyone had replied. When I opened the page, I saw that there was a new comment. It was actually a reply to my comment, and what it said kinda caught me off guard. The reply said, delete the comment or you'll regret it. For a moment it did kinda creep me out, but unfortunately I was in a very stupid and immature phase of my life. The kind where you are stupidly arrogant for no reason and too overconfident to think about the consequences. So instead of ignoring it, I decided to double down on my comment. So I wrote back, shut the F up, weirdo. I didn't think anything would come from it. I had commented on things on the dark web before and interacted with people online, and nothing had ever happened. So I just assumed that this was the same kind of situation. After that, I finally closed my computer and went back to sleep. The next few days went by completely normal. They passed by like any other days would, and I largely had forgotten about the video and my comment. But then, a few days later, I started noticing something strange. Every time I would go out in public, like going to school or going to buy groceries, I started noticing a black sedan always around me. It wasn't like it was directly following me, but it was always nearby. Sometimes it would be parked across the street from my school, and sometimes it would slowly drive right past me. The windows were heavily tinted, so I couldn't exactly see what's inside, and it always stayed far enough that I couldn't make out who was driving it. I thought I was being paranoid at first, but the more I noticed it, the more I was sure that it was the same car every time. I started noticing it so often that it almost felt like the person driving it was trying to make it obvious that I was being followed. That's when I remembered the video and my comment on the dark web. I just kept repeating that over and over again, because I was almost certain that this had something to do with it. At this point, I should have told my mom and tried to get the police involved. I was quite literally being followed by a stranger, so it was the obvious thing to do. But again, I was in a phase where I thought that I should deal with my mess on my own. I didn't want to be a wimp who runs to his parents to deal with the mess that he got himself into. Looking back, it was obviously a stupid call, but in the moment that was my reasoning, so I decided to keep ignoring it. One night, around 11 p.m., I was in my room scrolling through my phone when my mom called me downstairs. She told me we were out of eggs and we needed eggs for breakfast tomorrow. It was Sunday tomorrow, so I wouldn't wake up until late afternoon, so she told me that I had to get them now. I obviously wasn't too happy about it. It was a real drag to go out, but I was more worried about the car that was following me around. But I didn't want to tell my mother, so I ultimately gave in and went out to get some eggs. My mom's car was broken, which meant that I had to walk to the store. It was only a few blocks away, but it was still kinda scary. I quietly stepped outside and looked around for a bit. I didn't see the car anywhere, and there wasn't anyone around either. I figured that the coast was clear, so I quickly shut the door behind my back and started walking fast. As I walked, every few steps I would glance behind me and to the sides, just to keep an eye out for the car. But I didn't notice the car at all. And in fact, I reached the grocery store fairly quickly. I got the eggs from the store and got outside. It all happened so fast, I was honestly kinda surprised. But I wasn't complaining. This was the best case scenario for me. After exiting the store, I turned the corner and started heading back to my house, relieved that nothing happened. But as I walked past the narrow alley, I heard a faint creaking sound coming from behind me. I turned around immediately to see what it was, but there was nothing. I looked around in all directions, but there was no sign of anything. It was pretty dead at this hour. I was feeling uneasy, but I composed myself and kept walking. I picked up the pace as I walked, hoping to reach home as quickly as possible. But I only covered a few feet when I heard the creaking sound again. It was a lot closer this time. I turned around to see it, but again there was nothing. This was really starting to scare me. Even though I couldn't see anyone or any car around me, I was already regretting my decision to come out here. I took one last look behind me, and that's when I finally noticed it. There was a dumpster pushed up against the wall next to the alley. And just behind the dumpster, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a small shadow right behind the dumpster that looked like the head of a person. It wasn't obvious at first glance, but I was fairly certain that that was the outline of a person's head. I started sweating all over. I was sure that there was a person crouched behind the dumpster following me. I thought maybe it was a homeless person or something, but I wasn't taking any chances. So I turned around and started running towards my house as fast as I could. And as soon as I did that, I heard heavy footsteps right behind me. Whoever it was had come out from behind the dumpster and was chasing me. But I didn't look back. The adrenaline rush had kicked in, and it pushed me forward as I sprinted towards my house. I eventually reached my block and ran up to my house. I opened the door and practically threw myself inside, locking the door shut behind me. I was on the floor puffing and gasping for air as I heard my mom come out from the living room. She was obviously horrified when she saw my state and asked me what the hell was going on. I told her I was being chased by someone and that she should call the police. She was obviously shocked at all this, but after witnessing my state, she complied and quickly called the police. We locked all the doors and windows around the house and pulled all the curtains down and waited for the police to arrive. I didn't bother to look outside for the person. I was way too scared to do any of that. The police came shortly after and searched the area. They searched all over the property and also around the neighborhood just to see if anyone was still there. But obviously there was no one. The person was long gone by the time the police had arrived. I ended up explaining the entire situation to the police. I told them everything. The video, my comment, the car that was following me. The police filed it as an aggravated stalking case with a count of assault, but it never actually went anywhere. It was essentially an inactive case because of a lack of strong leads. The black car that was following me had unregistered tags, so it was likely a ghost car, and the dark web threats that I received were way too well hidden for the police to track. None of the store or street cameras caught his face, and I hadn't seen his face at all, so naturally there were no arrests. To this day, I have absolutely no idea who that person was and how he even managed to get a hold of my address. But I'm just glad that I was able to get out of my mess safely, because this was by far the scariest experience of my life. Middle school was a very happy and exciting time for me. It was probably the most fun I had in my life. I remember going out biking with my friends all the time. We used to have sleepovers almost every weekend. We used to play games at each other's houses and just do all kinds of silly stuff that kids usually did. I made a lot of joyful memories during middle school, memories that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, there is one memory that has stuck with me as well, but for completely different reasons. One day, me and my friends were hanging out at school just before class. There were 4 of us in the group. It was me, Lucas, Ray, and Alex. We were standing around talking about random things like we usually did every morning. At some point during the conversation, Lucas suddenly brought up an abandoned hospital near the suburban area outside the town. He told us that his uncle had told him stories about the place, and that apparently the hospital was rumored to be haunted. According to him, people sometimes go there to explore, and some supposedly go missing after entering the building. Now, the 4 of us absolutely loved horror. We were obsessed with scary stories, ghost stories, and all kind of stuff. So naturally, all 4 of us immediately got interested in what Lucas was saying. And after finishing the story, Lucas looked at us and casually just said, "I think we should go and explore it." Alex immediately pushed back. He said that it was a terrible idea, but me, Lucas, and Ray, we were already interested. We had already made up our minds to go, and eventually Alex had to give in too. So we decided that after school we would all go there together. Once school ended, the 4 of us rode our bikes all the way to the abandoned hospital. The place was located in a very isolated area just outside town. The building itself looked old and partially broken down, with large cracks across the walls and shattered windows. We stopped our bikes near the walls surrounding the property, and looked around carefully to make sure that nobody was watching us. I remember feeling nervous at that point, but I guess being surrounded by my friends made me feel more comfortable about the whole thing. After making sure nobody was around, we climbed over the wall and jumped inside the building. The inside of the hospital was dark since there was obviously no electricity anymore. Luckily though, we had grabbed a few flashlights from Lucas's house before coming here. At first everything just looked old and abandoned. We walked through the multiple hallways and rooms across the hospital, looking for something creepy or unusual. But there really wasn't much besides broken hospital equipment, rusted beds, and just rubble scattered everywhere. At one point we were walking through a hallway on the second floor while talking about leaving since there was nothing interesting that was happening. And that's when we first heard it. A creaking sound came from directly behind us. It sounded like a door slowly opening. The four of us immediately turned around. A man stepped outside from one of the dark rooms behind us. He looked to be somewhere in his late 40s. His face looked old and wrinkled, and there were bruises all over his arms and neck. What disturbed me the most though was the expression on his face. He wasn't angry or smiling or anything. He just had this strange, empty look while staring directly at us. Ray and Alex started talking to him. They nervously explained that we were just kids and that we were just about to leave. But the guy didn't respond at all. He just kept staring at us. And after a few seconds, I realized something that made me even more uncomfortable. He wasn't really looking at all of us. He was actually looking directly at me. I don't think the others noticed it because they were too busy trying to talk to him, but I could tell that his eyes were completely fixated on me. And then, without saying a word, the man took a slow step forward towards us. And that was enough for us. The four of us looked at each other, and then we turned around and bolted straight for the exit. We sprinted down the hallway and ran straight out the hospital. We jumped over the walls, we grabbed our bikes, and rode away as fast as we could without even looking back. We didn't stop until we reached Lucas's house. By the time we got there, we were coughing and gasping for air while trying to process what just happened. Alex immediately started saying that he knew going there was a bad idea, while the rest of us kept trying to figure out who that guy even was. We guessed that maybe he was some homeless addict or a mentally unstable person living inside the building, because he definitely did not seem normal. Eventually it got dark outside, so we all decided to head back home. Before leaving though, we all agreed not to tell anyone about this, because we knew if our parents found out about this, they would freak out and probably just ground us for weeks. And that was basically it. I genuinely thought that that was the end of it. We all did. It was just one creepy encounter with a strange man and we all had gotten away safely. But unfortunately, I was very wrong about that. The next day at school, everything seemed completely normal. Me and my friends acted like nothing happened and just went about our day as usual. But later that night, something strange happened. I was fast asleep in my room when I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. I remember rubbing my eyes and noticing that my curtains were actually moving from the wind that was coming through the window. I was confused at this because I usually slept with my windows closed. At first I just assumed that I had forgotten to shut it before going to bed. So I got up and walked over to close it. But before closing the window, I noticed that there were faint scratches along the outside ledge of the window. That was definitely strange. I stared at them for a moment because I didn't remember seeing any scratches there before. But I was tired, and honestly, I didn't feel like thinking too deeply about it. So I shut the window and went back to sleep. But over the next few nights, the exact same thing kept happening. Every single night I would randomly wake up and my window would just be open again. It was definitely strange for me, but back then I was a very careless kid. I just assumed that maybe my mom was opening the window during night because of the summer heat or something. I really didn't want to waste time worrying about something like this, so I just kept ignoring it. But then one night, something happened that completely changed everything. I woke up around 3 a.m. and once again, I noticed that my window was open and cold air was rushing into my room. I got out of bed and walked over to shut it. But this night, I wasn't exactly sleepy. So I stopped for a moment and just looked outside the window, taking in the view. I remember the weather was actually pretty nice for that night. And then after a few seconds, I finally closed the window and turned around to head back to sleep. But then, I heard a noise that stopped me in my place. A faint creaking sound came from behind me. I immediately turned around, trying to figure out where the sound came from. But there was nothing in the room that seemed to be out of place at first. I glanced towards the closet and I noticed that the closet door was slightly cracked open. That immediately confused me because I clearly remember closing it earlier that night. So I slowly walked over to it, planning to shut it properly this time. I stood directly in front of the closet door and reached for the handle. And then, I finally saw it. Through the small crack between the doors, I saw what looked like the eyeball of a person staring directly at me from inside the closet. For a second, my entire body completely froze. But then, I screamed at the top of my voice and ran straight outside my room. I rushed downstairs to my parents' room and practically threw myself on my parents while crying and yelling. My mom and dad obviously woke up terrified and confused. I told them that someone was in my room and they were inside my closet. My dad got up and immediately grabbed a baseball bat from his closet and rushed upstairs to my bedroom. Well, my mom pulled out her phone and immediately called 911. I was shaking uncontrollably at that point. A few moments later, my dad came downstairs and said that there was nobody in my room, but he said that both the closet door and the bedroom window were now wide open, indicating that whoever had been hiding must have escaped through the window when I ran downstairs. A few minutes later, the police knocked on our front door and we let them in. They did a thorough search of my room and the entire property. They also searched the surrounding areas just to make sure that nobody was still nearby. But obviously whoever had been inside my room was long gone. I ended up telling the police everything. The abandoned hospital, the strange man, all of it. Even though me and my friends had actually promised not to tell anyone. This situation was way too serious to hide anything anymore. My parents were obviously furious after finding out that we had snuck into an abandoned hospital. But at that point, they were far more concerned about my safety than anything else. The police also tried getting us to help describe the man for a sketch, but that unfortunately didn't work since none of us had gotten a good enough look at his face. The police also visited the abandoned hospital and searched it afterwards, but they couldn't find anyone there. It was like the man had completely vanished without a trace. So unfortunately, in the end there wasn't enough evidence or information for the police to actually identify anybody, so no one was ever caught. I still have no idea who that man in the hospital was, but at the very least, I'm just grateful that nobody was harmed that night.